All right, so let's jump into some Eagles talk. Al, you were boots on the ground last night at training camp. If you would have followed us on Instagram, you would have saw some of the pictures and live videos. Give us a little scouting report of what you saw.
Sure. So to give you guys an idea of where I was actually on the field. And I was in the left corner of the end zone, where primarily the Eagles, the offense was going towards. So I did get to see a pretty close look at a lot of the guys. Right away, some of the things that stood out as far as the players, AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts both look bigger. I don't know if that's just because they were legitimately, probably about 50 feet away from me. And I've never seen them that close in my life, but they look bigger. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis look like mountains. Like they look like they're not human beings. They're aliens. As far as what I saw from the actual practices, so I saw some of the the different things that they were doing as far as positional groups, but I didn't take too much away from that because they're kind of walking through it, going after like maybe like 70-75%, the starters at least, not so much the Tanner McKees of the world and the Ian Books of the world. But when they actually practiced, they practiced a whole bunch of different game situations where they had the first team O against the second team D, and then vice versa for the most part. And some of the things that stood out to me, first of all, was the offense was really sloppy with penalties. I want to say on one drive alone, there was 3 penalties on the offense, and I think all 3 were false starts, but they just played through 2 of them because they didn't want to set everybody up again, etc. So that stood out to me as something that, like, what's going
like that
on?
last year, though. It's weird. I don't know why they do that.
It did happen last year. On one in particular, the entire line moved. Everyone moved. And Kelsey was just sitting there with the ball. So I don't know if that's on him, if that's on the line, who that's on. But just something that stood out to me because, again, we have a new offensive coordinator this year. So just something that you really don't want to see in the last practice of the year from a Super Bowl contending team. Jalen ran a lot, which I hated because obviously they're not hitting him. And the defensive line isn't really truly going after him. So for him to pull it down and run a lot, lanes are open that aren't going to be open. So I felt like that was almost like wasted reps with the first team. He did make a couple of pretty good throws, nothing like crazy. The best throw of the practice was they were running a drill where they had to score 8 points from the 25-yard line. And he found A.J. Brown in the corner of the end zone on kind of a jump ball that he caught over one of the backup corners for the touchdown. He got both feet in, and I was right there to see both feet in. It was pretty cool. That was his best throw. He definitely was favoring A.J. Brown. So I think there is still going to be, if you're going to take, a lot away from just this one practice, I think there's still going to be a little bit of a gap between the number of targets that AJ gets versus the number of targets that Devontae gets. But they did seem to be working Devontae in. I posted on Instagram, there was a play where they ran him kind of on an end around where they handed the ball off to Devontae Smith, which I've never seen before. I don't know if you guys can recall ever seeing something like that, a gadget play for Devontae to get the ball in his hands. But I think that's a great way to get to use him more and get him more in the open field. The only other things that really stood out to me, Nolan Smith looked good. He was quick off the snap. Again, hard to judge because there's not much going on once he gets into the backfield. He's kind of just letting up once he gets back there. And second was Marcus Mariota's arm is awful. He is so inaccurate. Balls were sailing left and right. Balls were hitting the dirt. I thought I was watching Prime McNabb for a little bit there. But the one thing he did do well was run. And I know I just said about Jalen Hurts, I didn't like that he ran a lot. At least when Mariota ran, he was running against the first team defense. So he did have a little bit more pressure on him, and he had to make those plays with his legs. But as far as his arm and his decision-making, it was awful. So if we have to rely on him for more than maybe 2 or 3 games this season, they're going to be hard-pressed to win those
2
games.
or 3? I hope you don't have to see him.
No, but that's what I mean. But like I'm saying, 1 or 2 games you might be able to skate by. You know what I mean? You play in Arizona on New Year's Eve. You might be able to skate by, but 2 or 3 games, it's not 3 or 4 games. It's not gonna work.
So my big question to you is, did anybody recognize you?
Baldy walked by, dapped it up, said, "Yo, Al, my man."
Did he come back from Antigua or wherever? He always has a story.
No, big shout out,
Al, Philly Pretzel Factory, Tupac changes.
All kinds of heat for the fast food draft. No, Brent Selleck, I got to shout him out because he was nice enough to give my son an autograph, as did Swoop. But other than that, none of the players really like walked and stopped by us. Not that we, expected it, but that was a cool experience.
No, that's awesome.
Al,
especially for your son.
to what your point when you said about the linemen, how they're huge, and I think I've told the story on this before, but in case someone's new listening, when I saw years ago when they were up at Lehigh for training camp, and me and Ludus were right in like the second row by the rope, and Max Gillis was right there, and he literally looked like a rhinoceros.
Yeah.
They were pouring water down his pads in the back, and it was like he was an animal. It was strange, but also like you're taken aback by the size of these dudes.
These guys' ankles almost touch when they're standing still. Like their ankles are that thick, their calves are that thick. It's Jordan Mailata dwarfed Landon Dickerson standing next to him. It's like
he's a big guy too.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. My question to you is on the Devontae Smith play, where was Quez Watkins?
I didn't see a lot of Quiz out there at all, to be honest. Zacchaeus, how do you say his name?
Olamide Zacchaeus.
He was out there a lot.
The Pride of St. Joe's Prep.
I like him.
I love him. I think that's a really underrated.
Love's a strong word.
I do. I like the kid. He was a nice player.
I didn't see too much out of him last night, if I'm being honest.
I want to jump into some questions for you guys. So I want to start with, we all know the positives of this team and how good they could be. Super Bowl ceiling. What are your concerns with this roster as it currently sits? So let's go to Chris, a resident homer, since he'll probably be the shortest of as far as concerns with the
team. Honestly, I mean, we know that they're stacked. The spot that I was concerned with the most was I thought linebacker was light, and then they go out and they sign Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham this weekend, the 1-year deals. Neither one of those guys are, I mean, I know they've both had injuries, but neither one of them are old at all. I mean, they're both in their prime years still. I think I want to say Cunningham is 28. Jack is probably around the same age. 2 years ago, Cunningham had 164 tackles. These guys aren't far removed from putting up big numbers in the league. So I don't know what the plan is as far as who's going to, I mean, I think Nakobe was that the plan is from the start. I'm a little bit concerned by these acquisitions in the sense of, do they want to just get deeper, or is it because Dean's injury is more than they're leading on? I don't know, but that was my spot where I was a little bit nervous. Also, the safety position, I'm still a little bit nervous on, but I mean, I'm plenty satisfied with the roster overall as a whole and with those acquisitions this weekend.
So I'll jump in here. I'm going to kind of jump on what you said, Chris, but I'm going to take it to a larger degree. I have major concerns on the defense as a whole.
Yep.
And they lost arguably their best player on defense. Would we all agree with that? And Javon Hargrave? I mean, you could argue Hassan Reddick.
Him and Reddick, yeah.
I was going to say, man, come on.
But listen, Javon was really, really good last year and may have been the cog in that defense, Reddick was great, but arguably their best player. You won't remember Javon Hargrave when you watch Jalen Carter play for the people. They lost 2 linebackers. They lost the safety. We have Darius Slay, who, let's be honest, was not himself the second half of the last season. He was, a little, I don't want to say a shell because he was still good, but he wasn't his elite self in the second half of the season. We got James Bradbury off of payday. He played in the contract year last year, got paid. We've seen him go in the tank a year after being really good in the past. Their linebackers, Chris, you mentioned it. They brought in some supplements who, Miles Jack is young, but he's kind of been a disappointment throughout his career. He's bounced around a little bit after being a first-round pick. They're very young on the defensive end, and they've got a lot of unknowns. And to me, if you're a Super Bowl contender, unknowns, they're not necessarily good things. So again, do I think Nolan Smith's going to be good? Do I think Javon Carter's going to be good? Do I think Jordan Davis is going to be good? Like they should be their first-round picks, but we haven't seen it. So there's been plenty of guys who have been first-round busts throughout their career as well. So if you have a championship team and to be relying on those 3 guys, plus Nakobe Dean, who are basically 4 NFL players that you're going to count on who haven't stepped on the field, as well as having those additional holes that from CJ Gardner-Johnson leaving, from TJ Edwards, from Kaiser White, from Javon Hargrave, all those guys leaving. There's question marks on the defense.
Yeah. I'm not
Offensively,
gonna,
offensively, I think they're loaded. They're going to be ridiculously good. But I have major concerns on the defensive side of the ball.
Adam, it's exactly what I have. I have lots of questions on defense, and I have everything you just said. So I'm not going to repeat it. We have to make up those 11 sacks that we're losing with Javon Hargrave. Does Jalen Carter step in from day one on his career path of being the next Aaron Donald, or is there some growing pains? And then you add to, on top of all that, it's not a small deal that we have two new coordinators, especially Brian Johnson, which I trust this offense. I do. But even though everyone says he was basically born for this job, he's still green and he still has to prove it at the NFL level. So between him and Sean Desai, there's questions there as well. There's questions with the coaching.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to add, besides the defensive coordinator, which you hit on, is you have two aging defensive linemen that if these young guys aren't able to step in, may not be able to play a full load in BG and Fletcher. I mean, Fletcher's been on decline for 4 or 5 years now, and he's still serviceable, but he's not the guy he was.
I think no, because I'm trying to get the
shell shock.
I am shell shocked because I can't believe that
it took us 57 episodes.
Jordan Davis, from all accounts so far, has been much improved since last year already in camp.
So was Nah Brown back in the day, every training camp.
All right, come on, dude. Let's not be disrespectful. All right. Jalen Carter, like I said, is going to be a superstar. I can't wait to watch those two play together. Nolan Smith has apparently looked really good already. These guys already have championship pedigrees. They come from the best defense in the country, and not just the best defense in the country, but one of the best historical defenses. I'm not worried at all about them transitioning. I think that the one concern I would agree with is the defensive coordinator for, decide to come in here and have a whole new team, put his scheme in place. You always get a little bit nervous about that until you see it and play. But Johnson, as an offensive coordinator, I'm not nervous. I mean, he was here last year, so he's already been here. He knows what we run. He knows the quarterback very well. He's known him since he was a kid. I'm not worried at all about that. But Desai, I can definitely understand not the concern, but just the skepticism to just see if, the one thing I heard about him earlier in the summer, he was talking and he said how there's a lot of similarities in what he likes to do and what Jonathan Gannon did. And that scared the hell out of me because Gannon, you talk about inconsistent. There were games where we were lights out on defense, and there were games where those guys looked like they didn't know who was supposed to be where. So I didn't like his lack of maybe Desai's a better adjuster in game than Gannon was, which would be huge. But that's the one concern I think I have. Other than that, personnel wise, I'm not going to look. Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham are not going to play a lot this year. I mean, I think they're going to aim for between 15 and 20 snaps a game for those guys. They're not going to be in there a lot to the point where they're going to get overworked and exposed as far as, aging.
But here's the thing. I think Carter, Smith, and those guys are going to be good, but you're asking them to be championship good in their rookie year, and there's a difference. They could be superstar guys, but Aaron Donald was not Aaron Donald until year 5, year 6. Really good player, probably his rookie year, but not the dominant force he is now. And if you want to win a Super Bowl,
year 5 or 6 for Aaron Donald?
But I'm talking about his rookie year. I'm talking if you want to win a Super Bowl, you need these guys to be dominant on the defensive side of the ball, like Javon Hargrave was last year. And that's a lot to ask out of a rookie.
Defense dominant?
Say it again.
Was the Chiefs defense dominant?
Chris Jones is probably a top 3 defensive player in the year, and they ended up supplementing themselves with rookies who turned in to be serviceable. And they
didn't have a great defense. They gave up 31 points in the Super Bowl.
Okay, against one of the best offenses. How many points did the Eagles defense give up?
But my point is like
no. How many points did the Eagles defense give up?
We gave up 35. But
okay,
again, that was
they were a dominant defense for most
of
of the year. You thought they were a dominant defense for most of the year,
right? So
Okay.
they had a lapse again because their coach didn't know how to adjust. That's well documented. Those guys will tell you in a New York Minute that they did not adjust in that game. Nonetheless, the NFL right now is an offensive league. You can obviously you want to have greatness on both sides of the ball, but it is more important to be dominant right now in the NFL on the offensive side.
For
And like
100%.
you said earlier that the Eagles have zero concerns aside from health. Obviously, you want to make sure you stay healthy, but that aside, is going to be one of the best, if not the best, offense in the league. And I think that propels us into a favorite. That's why we're the favorite in the NFC. I think that's why a lot of folks think we can still go back to the Super Bowl and come out on top this time because of the offense.
Yeah, no doubt. But the question is, what are your concerns? I'm not trying to say the Eagles are not going to be a really good football team because they are. I'm just saying my concerns are purely on the defensive side of the ball, and I think there's more there than some of the people are admitting.
I mean, I think a lot of teams would love to have a secondary that has Vontae Maddox as your slot and Darius Slay and Bradbury as your outside corners. I think I would say 25 to 28 teams would love to have that.
I agree with you, but I also think that cornerbacks are almost like relief pitchers in baseball, where for some reason the performance from year to year is a little unpredictable. You look at a guy like J.C. Jackson he was in New England, then goes to San Diego, so I understand there's a systemic change there. But like he forgot how to play last year, and you've seen it with guys who come to the Eagles. Byron Maxwell, he'll have a good year, he'll have a bad year. Same thing with like Asante when he was here. It was kind of year to year with those guys, and I don't know why that is at the cornerback position.
Cornerback's the hardest position to play on defense, in my opinion.
Agreed. I agree with that.
You're always reactionary, and guess what? Receivers get better every year. These guys come in the league now, and they're machines, and you have to react to it and be able to play against it. Also, they're not only playing against the receiver, their opponent, but they're also playing against officiating and the rule changes and how it's played out in the field as well nowadays. It's not the same NFL as it was even 5 years ago. So you really have no leeway, very minimal leeway as a corner in today's NFL, which again showed to the point of why it's so much more important to have a better offense, because the rules dictate now that defense is harder to play.
For sure, 100%. I can't believe I didn't mention Nandi Asamoah as one of my examples there. But no, cornerback's the hardest position. I mean, they can't put a hand on these guys. And if you get, if a team runs 32 pass plays and you get beat twice, you're going to be on a highlight reel. If you get beat
Adam, to your point, we're asking more out of our corners this year because now they have Reed Blankenship and potentially Terrell Edmonds or Sidney Brown back behind them. That's different. That's a different look.
So to your point, Al, is there any players out there on free agency that you would look to add to supplement maybe the defense or even on the offensive side of the ball that's still out there?
Yeah, I actually had that I would like to see them add safety or linebacker depth. And they went ahead and they added the linebacker depth in between when I took that note and this recording. So they checked off one of the boxes. Now, as far as safety, I'm sure you guys have some names. I don't have any names, but I would like to see them add somebody, by all accounts, they like Brown. Edmonds looked good at camp. He broke up a couple passes on some of those drills where they were heading down the field. I'm okay with where we're at, but if they added somebody, I wouldn't hate it.
I saw a tweet today, and this is just purely me scrolling Twitter, and I don't know how legit the source was, that Terrell Edmonds might not make the team.
Oh, no, I don't. I mean,
again, take that for what it's worth. I don't know the source. I don't know if he has any inside information, but it was the giant. It wasn't just Terrell Edmonds might not make the team. It was a giant roster projection. It had all the people and the depth chart, and it did not. It had him as the last cut. So curious to see.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely gonna be in for competition, but I can't imagine. I mean, if he does, then that means that Brown's a stud.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll have to see. I have Bradley Roby as a name to keep an eye on. I always like cornerback depth, and I know he's an outside guy, and I don't know if he has the flexibility to move to safety, but he's a guy who's been around. He's been a decent cornerback, and again, I just always like having depth in that secondary. We've seen it many times last year when I think didn't Slay miss a couple games when he was hurt last year, and I mean we saw Vontae Maddox obviously miss a bunch of games. You can never have enough depth in the secondary.
I agree. I actually not a free agent as much, but a guy that I've got my eye on for on the trade market if things go bad for them early is Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard's he's a Philly guy actually, Tennessee Titans safety, two-time All-Pro, two-time first team All-Pro, two-time Pro Bowler. He's 29, so he's still got a couple more prime years. And he has never missed I don't believe he's ever missed a game. So he's always available. And he's one of the guys that defense in Tennessee, they love that dude.
He's really good.
He's a cog in that defense, and I would love to be able to bring him back home this season if Tennessee kind of goes by the wayside earlier by the trade deadline. I know that the Buda Baker stuff is kind of quieted down since he got the extension about a week or two ago. So I don't think that's going to happen at this point, but I think Byard would be a great acquisition.
That's a really good name to keep an eye on. I think that's where they'll probably explore. But again, we won't know until we see the unit actually out on the field and see what they're doing. So again, we're a couple weeks away from the NFL season starting. Preseason, we'll get a look this week, but the preseason's not what it used to be. You used to be able to get a quarter, a half in game 2 or 3, and now you're lucky if you see these guys for a drive or two in the preseason.
Yeah.
But we will get back to NFL in segment 2 as we're going to continue our previews, and we're going to go out to the AFC West, which is a division that we extremely overrated last year, and we'll see if we're going to do it again. So we'll be right back for segment 2. Welcome back to segment 2. As I mentioned, we're going to continue our preview along the entire NFL with this is division number 4, right? We did 2 North divisions.
Yeah.
Then NFC West, and now AFC West.
Yep.
All right, division number 4, halfway home after tonight. As always, we're going to start at the bottom based on the Vegas odds. The Las Vegas Raiders over under is 6.5. They finished 6-11 last year. Crazy stat for you boys. How many winning seasons do you think the Raiders have had since 2003? So the last 20 years, how many winning seasons for the Raiders?
That was right
above 500, not
above,
playoffs.
above 500, not at 500, above.
Was that right after the Super Bowl year?
Yes.
2.
I was going to say 3.
2 is correct. 2 winning seasons in the last 20 years.
That's
They have finally moved on from Derek Carr. In is Jimmy Garoppolo. Terrible defensively last year, 28th. Offense was decent. Let's start with Al. Give us your thoughts on the Raiders.
So Jimmy Garoppolo is your typical game manager. He's not going to win you games on your own. So despite the fact that the Raiders still have Devontae Adams, who's one of the best wide receivers in football, and Josh Jacobs, who was the NFL rushing champ last year, if I'm not mistaken, that's a downgrade for me. I know you hate Derek Carr, Seltzer. You think he's the most overrated quarterback in the NFL, but Jimmy G is a clear downgrade. He's not going to be gunslinging down the field. He's not going to be putting points up when they need it. He's going to be doing his best to not screw up. They had one of the worst defenses in the league last year. They didn't get any better. They have Max Crosby and not much else, which if you guys watch that quarterback series on Netflix, Max Crosby's a badass, dude. I am not trying to
awesome.
I'm not trying to run into him at any time. They're going to need Tyree Wilson, the DN from Texas Tech. They need him to start as a force from day one if they have any chance to field a competent defense. They don't really have an O-line, so there's not much protection, for Jimmy G. I have this dreadful Las Vegas Raiders team hitting the under 6.5, but I have them winning only 4 games this season at 4-13.
Chris?
So I'm right on the line for all 4 of these teams. I think that Al Garoppolo is a game manager, but I think that might actually be a benefit to them. I think Derek Carr got them in tough spots sometime because of his gunsling. Garoppolo is just one of those guys that finds a way to win games. He's rarely had times where he's in the game and you're like, what is this guy doing? He's a mess. Of course he's had mistakes and things like that here and there, but he's not a guy who just comes in and just wrecks games. I like the front of their draft. Tyree Wilson, you mentioned now. My boy Michael Mayer, Notre Dame, is going to be the next Gronk. He is a stud. That's why they were comfortable trading Darren Waller. because Mayer's going to be a beast. So I think that's going to be benefits them, another weapon on offense that they definitely will need because Devontae can't do it alone. We don't know what Josh Jacobs' situation is going to be still. I have them winning 7 games, which I believe their over-under was, what, 6.5?
Yep.
So I had them slightly with the over. I could easily see them winning 6 and being in the under. So I could see Al hitting out about 4, but I could see the under hitting. But I'm going to go with 7 and take the over if I had to put cold hard cash on it.
All right, so I'll be the tiebreaker in this situation. I think one thing that I came up with in this division specifically is I have a lot of talk about the coaching. And to me, Josh McDaniel is now 17-28 lifetime as a head coach. You know, has proven himself as a coordinator, but hasn't really done it on the head coaching side. You know, what's going on with Josh Jacobs? He was electric last year, really. You know, obviously he was a first round pick, but really had a breakout year last year. Now there's reports he might get traded. He's holding out for the franchise tag, kind of similar to a Saquon Barkley situation, which ended up getting resolved. They lost Darren Waller. This feels like a rebuild to me. And I'm with Al. I have them at 4-13. I don't see a lot of good things coming for this team. They don't have the pedigree of a winning franchise, and I don't see it moving in that direction this year. So I'm going the under for the Raiders at 4-13 as well.
I will say with Garoppolo's health, they better hope he stays healthy because behind him is ugly. Brian Hoyer and rookie Aiden O'Connell.
Isn't he hurt too already, Jimmy G? Like, hasn't Hoyer been taking first team snaps and can't? Did I read that somewhere?
I don't know.
He's not on the PUP list. To my knowledge, he's. I mean, I haven't heard that. Doesn't mean that you're not wrong. I just haven't heard that, but I know that their depth is garbage.
All right, let's move forward to Denver.
Yeah,
Denver, 5-12 last year. I mentioned last week, I think the Rams were probably the biggest disappointment in the NFL last season, but the Broncos were not far behind. Over under this year's 8.5. They were 21st in offense last year. They were 7th in defense. Russell Wilson was flat out terrible. But the question is, was it Russell Wilson or was it Nathaniel Hackett, who we ripped on this podcast many, many times, just being in over his head as head coach of the Denver Broncos? In is Sean Payton. Sean Payton, couple years out after coaching New Orleans. He's back in, known for his being an offensive guru. If anybody can wake Russell Wilson up, it's probably him. I'll open up on this one. This was the hardest one for me. And I do really like this team. They played the most close games in the league last year, despite being disgraceful on offense. How many weeks did we come on this podcast and make fun of the Broncos because they're losing games 10-8 or 11-7?
They were finding ways to score like 4 points a game.
They couldn't figure it out, and it was crazy to me. And I look at Sean Payton and I say to myself, how good was Drew Brees at the end of his career when he was throwing nothing but 5-6 yard dump offs? Was that more Sean Payton leading those New Orleans teams, or was that Drew Brees just kind of managing it because he didn't have a lot left? I think Sean Payton deserves a lot of credit for leading those teams. And those New Orleans defenses were very good, but so is this Denver defense. And they do have Javonte Williams, should be back off the ACL. I think this team is going to be a lot better than they were last year. I think Russ will get a little bit of a kick in the ass from this offense. With all of that said, I'm still taking the under. I have them at 8-9. But it wouldn't surprise me if everything turned out right. This team managed to get to 11 wins or something and be a contender in that division. I couldn't quite get there with the division being as good as it is, and the fact that I think the schedule was a little bit tough. But this is a team that could go either way for me.
Well, what does George W. Bush, former president of the United States, what's he famous for saying? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Shame on you. Listen, I got Denver actually having a better season this year, having a little bit more of the season we thought they were going to have last year. I'm willing to give them a pass because I truly believe that Nathaniel Hackett is a top 5 worst coach in NFL history. The
O-type status.
Yeah, absolutely. The O-line should be improved. Bringing in Mike McGlinchey from San Francisco and Ben Powers from Baltimore. They also get their left tackle, Garrett Bowles, returning from a season-ending injury last year. I like Jerry Jeudy, and I think he has a chance to finally step up and really fill in that wide receiver one role that they expected him to take when they drafted him 3 or 4 years ago. Tim Patrick is out for the season already. They have a very solid defense. They have a great secondary with Patrick Surtain Jr., capable of shutting down an entire side of the field. Last year, their offense was terrible. Simply put, it was terrible. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. I have them at the over. I was able to squeak out 10 wins for this Broncos team.
Wow.
So Broncos country, let's ride. Because I got you at 10-7.
All right, Chris.
Again, I'm right by the number here. I have them at 8-9 also, Seltzer. I think a lot of that for me has to do with just having respect for Sean Payton and his culture that he brings and instills in his teams. I think that Russell Wilson for a long time has been one of my favorite players, and I can't imagine him being that bad again, especially with the fact that we know now what we know in terms of the scheme and the coaching that they had last year, how awful it was. So having a QB whisperer like Sean Payton, I think will help Russell Wilson tremendously. I've always loved their receiver room. I love Sutton. I love Jeudy. I think that they're very underrated. They just need to have a good system and a great quarterback with them to really show how good they can be. And also they got to stay healthy. But I got 8. I can't imagine them just going from dead last in the league in points per game to all of a sudden, we talk about this league being an offensive league now. And if you're dead last, it's going to take some time to get that back. So I think they take a jump. I think they win 8 games this year, which is still a 3-game improvement. I mean, it's still an improvement. And I think next year is the year they take the leap back to the playoffs potentially. But this year, I think they're still going to be just a mediocre team. They'll be a tough out every week, but I don't think they're good enough to get over the hump and get to a winning record.
All right, so Chris and I on the under at 8-9, Al with the over at 10-7. Let's jump a little bit west and go to the LA Chargers. 10-7 last year. The over under this year is 9.5. Embarrassing loss in the playoffs to the Jacksonville Jaguars with that monster lead at halftime. They finished 9th in the league in offense. They were 20th in defense. Chris, we'll start with you. Where are your thoughts on the Chargers?
I think that they're the opposite of the Broncos in the sense of I trust Sean Payton. I don't trust Staley for the Chargers. I think that guy is one of the most. I think he's one of the worst head coaches in football, to be honest with you. Last year, I don't think was an accident as far as that implosion. Leadership and those kind of moments start from the top and work their way down. And I just think that guy has found a lot of ways to either blow games because of his bad decision-making and things like that. And it just kind of trickles down. And the Chargers are one of those teams that just can't get out of their own way. I think that what were they, 10-7 last year?
Yep.
I had them at 9 wins. I could see them getting 10. I'm going to stick with 9 just because, like I said, I love the quarterback. I love Justin Herbert. I think he's a great player, definitely a top 5 quarterback. I just don't trust the rest of the team. I don't trust their coaching. I don't trust their leadership. I don't know. And it's also hard to play you're also sharing a division, with the Chiefs, and that's going to be a tough task for them to get over the hump of, to pass those guys. They might be able to sneak in again like they did last year in the playoffs. I don't know what the season's going to hold as far as if 9 wins would be enough, but I had them at 9 wins, which I believe I think they were 9.5, I believe you said. So I guess I'll have them at the under. But again, I'm right on the lines for this division were perfect. It's going to be very difficult to win money in this betting on this division.
Go ahead, Al.
I disagree. I think we got a cash cow right here, Chris. What a Chargers way to end the season last year. First of all, blowing that lead to Jacksonville. even with Justin Herbert, whom I agree with you, I believe is a great quarterback on the precipice of becoming potentially one of the best quarterbacks in the league, along with, the Burrows and the Mahomeses and the Hurtses. I still don't trust Brandon Staley. I'm still in that camp with you. I think this is a very average team, though, with a very below average coach playing a very difficult schedule. They have Derwin James and Asante Samuel Jr. Making up a very good secondary.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be going up this year against an absolute gamut of great quarterbacks outside of their division, outside of Patrick Mahomes' choice this season. They go up against Lamar Jackson. They go up against Josh Allen. They go up against Aaron Rodgers. They go up against Kirk Cousins, whom one of us said was pedestrian not too long ago on this podcast. I think Joey Bosa is just an injury waiting to happen every season, and it affects them every year. When he goes down, this defense becomes one of the worst defenses in the league when he's not on the field. And I know that last year it wasn't just Bosa. They also saw injuries on the offensive side of the football. Keenan Allen went down for a number of games. Mike Williams went down for a number of games. But at the end of the day here, I think that the Chargers just have a stink on them, and I think they take a step back so that Denver takes that step forward. I have the Chargers at 6-11.
Oh,
And they are my best bet for the AFC West.
Wow. And the best bet at 6 wins?
Best bet.
Wow. So I'm glad you brought up their schedule, because I agree. Their schedule's tough. I mean, they only have, from what I'm seeing here, they only have about 3, maybe 4 games where it's like, oh, that's a gimme win against, a team that wasn't that great last year. But those teams are a lot more improved, or at least supposed to be a lot more improved this year. So, and the other teams that coming in were supposed to be good are still good, if not better. So they do have a tough schedule. I like the team. Don't get me wrong. I like the team. I just think Brandon Staley is, like, we've talked about it. None of us trust him. And I'll tell you what else I don't trust. As from a fantasy perspective and just a football perspective to win games for this team. Mike Williams, bro, stay on the field. Like, this guy, if anybody has Mike Williams in fantasy, you know what I'm talking about. You cannot trust him ever in a game, in week to week. Like, this guy, he gets a pulled, cuts his fingernails wrong, he might not come back out from halftime. You never know with this dude. If he can just stay healthy, he's a stud player. They would be so much better. If Sean Payton went to the Chargers, they'd be so much better. But you can't trust Williams. Payton's in Denver. They're still stuck with Staley, who should have lost his job after that playoff game, by the way. I don't think they should even brought him back. I can't. I think 9 wins, 10 at the most for them. And like I said, if I had to put money on it, I'm going with the under still at 9. But man, that's got to be a frustrating team for, like, the handful of fans that they have, because they've got some talent. I just don't know if they're in a position to put it together.
not so fast.
You need a new phrase, dude. Somebody already uses that.
Yeah, you need Lee Corso's going to sue us, bro.
Not so quick.
Listen, I am Brandon Staley's biggest hater. I think he's a horrible football coach. With that said, I'm going to give you guys 3 quarterbacks. I want you to tell me what they have in common. Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, and Davis Mills. Any idea?
Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, Davis Mills. 3 syllables in their name.
That's probably 3 of the whitest dudes in the league.
They were the only 3 quarterbacks in the NFL with a lower yards per attempt than Justin Herbert last year, which makes 0 sense considering the arm and cannon that Justin Herbert has.
And accuracy.
And what did they do this year that I think is going to help this team tremendously is they got rid of offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, and they brought in Kellen Moore from Dallas. And Kellen Moore is a much more vertical, pass-happy offensive coordinator, and I think he's going to open up this offense for Justin Herbert, who has had the reins put on him the last 2 seasons and has still put up numbers despite that. They went out in the first round. They drafted Quentin Johnson out of TCU, who is by all accounts, a down the field threat. I believe he led FBS in yards per catch last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Overrated player.
Wait, what was that?
I think he's an overrated player, but go ahead.
But he's got the speed to get down the field. I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about him, other than the fact that yards per catch is one of the top in the country, and this team needs somebody who can stretch the field. At the end of the day, Rashawn Slater, Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Keenan Allen all missed 45 games combined. And with all of that being said, with Brandon Staley, with Joe Lombardi as the offensive coordinator, with all the injuries, they still won 10 games. And even though this franchise has a stink on it, I think for some reason, every year I'm captivated by them. I have them at 12-5, and that's my best bet that they're going to go over the 9.5 because I don't think much more can go wrong for them than did last year, and they still won 10 games.
And we're going to find out if they make the Super Bowl. They were a Super Bowl pick last year, right? Wasn't it
No,
them?
I don't think I think I had
Wasn't it them and the Rams? Wasn't it an all LA Super Bowl?
Buffalo and the Rams.
We'll check
I
it.
didn't have I had the Chargers winning the division though in the West.
Yeah,
We'll see if I have it again. Maybe I'll have it again. We'll find out right now. So let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs. 14-3 last year. The over-under this year is 11.5. They've won 12 or more games each of the last 5 seasons. They've won the division 7 times in a row. They've been to 3 of the past 4 Super Bowls, as well as the past 6 conference championships. I guess it's probably only right that I start after last year predicting that this team would not go to the playoffs.
Yeah, write that wrong, bro.
So where am I at this year? There's some questions on this team. Chris Jones, contract situation, not at camp, the best defensive player on that roster. They've lost both of their starting tackles, and as well as Juju and Mikael Hardman. So you're looking at a team that lost Tyreek Hill last year and now has lost 2 additional receivers. The wide receiver room is shallow outside of Kadarius Toney, who has not proven he can stay on the field for an entire season. Does it matter? That's the question. And the answer is, how can I sit here? I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago and say that Joe Burrow is a lock for double-digit wins and lock it in and not say the same about Patrick Mahomes. I learned my lesson. This team has won 12 or more games each of the past 5 years, and now the number's sitting at 11.5. I'm taking the over, boys. There's no way to go around it. He's the best quarterback in the league. They have one of the best coaches in the league. They had some young guys on defense who really stepped up last year. Now in their second and third year should only get better. I have them at 13-4 and winning the AFC West, and they'll be a contender when it's all said and done. Al?
You basically took a lot of what I was going to say. Chris Jones not participating in camp is a concern, obviously, but they still are bringing back, if you count him, 10 starters on the defensive side of the football, which they're not a great defensive team. We know that. But that's still, at least the consistency is there. The interior of the offensive line is still one of the best, if not the best in football. Can Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce do it again? The receivers seem so pedestrian, but it didn't seem to matter last year when they were the number 1 offense in the league. So I can't sit here and say that there's anything that tells me that they're not going to do it again. The Kings stay the king, right? I got Kansas City over 11.5. I have their floor at 12 wins. So I have them at 12-5, easily can see them 13-4, 14-3.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. 12 wins for me. And I think that absolutely is the floor. I actually think that they might struggle in the second half of the year just because of the way that their schedule plays out. They have a couple games that I think are on the challenging end for anybody. But I mean, they could easily go into that Eagles game 9-0. I think that could be about, the NFL would love for the Chiefs and Eagles to both be undefeated going into that game. And it very well could happen. You guys laughed at me when I thought the Eagles were going to start off 8-0 or 9-0, whatever I said last year, and it basically played out. So it could happen again. Both those teams are good enough for it. I think that, my concern is with the receivers. Mahomes is a great player, but obviously he still needs weapons. I love Sky Moore. I have him in one of my fantasy leagues. I think he's going to take a big leap forward this year. But let's not act like losing Juju Smith-Schuster and Nicole Hardman is a huge deal. I mean, they weren't even using Hardman half the
You're
time
right.
anyway last year.
You're right. You're right about that.
So I'm not worried about that. Kadarius Toney is very dangerous. He's got to stay healthy. Pacheco is very good in backfield. Kelsey is I keep waiting for that guy to lose a step, and he just doesn't. So I don't know. Maybe this is the year. We'll see. But he does a great job of staying active and in shape. At worst, I see at worst 12 wins. So
Is that
the over, and
your best bet, Chris?
that's my lock. That's my lock.
All right, so let's run through our picks again. I'll go first and give my rundown here. I've got the Raiders at 4-13, which is the under. I've got the Broncos at 8-9, which is the under. I've got the Chargers at 12-5. That's my best bet is the over. And I've got the Kansas City Chiefs at 13-4, which is also the over.
I have the Raiders at 4-13, under 6. That's the under. I have the Broncos 10-7. That's over. I have the Chargers with a 6-win difference between Adam and me at 6-11. That's the under, and that's my best bet. And then I have the Chiefs at 12-5, and that's the over as well.
And I have the Vegas Raiders at 7-10 with the over, although I could be talked out of that. But Broncos 8-9 with the under, Chargers 9-8 with the under, and Kansas City 12-5 with the over at worst.
All right, so that was your AFC West. Again, we are now halfway through the divisions, and we'll be back next week. I think we'll jump to the NFC South next week, right? We'll go to the South. We'll save the NFC East and the AFC East for last. But
two shit. Wait a minute. We've been talking about combining two divisions in one show. We might have to combine those two next week into one segment. That's horrible.
Rough. We might lose if we do both of those in one episode. There might not be.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That might be tough. That's tough sledding.
But now we're going to continue the football talk in segment 3. A couple weeks ago, we did our fantasy running back segment, Chris and I. Now we're going to jump into fantasy receivers. And Al, this is your first fantasy segment for us, so we'll have to grade you out.
This is my first fantasy anything in like 8 years, so this is going to be rough.
Grain of salt.
Dude. Welcome back. Be right back. Welcome back to segment 3, fantasy football wide receivers. As we've hit August, a lot of your drafts have, I don't want to say have started, but they will be coming in the next few weeks, and the fantasy football talk has ramped up. Usually it's just Chris and I doing the fantasy segments. And, Chris, one thing that I think we learned last year is that the wide receivers are a lot more predictable than the running backs. So you tend to see, the names in the preseason, they're pretty steady. And those are the guys that tend to be at the top every year. But we're going to do it a little bit differently tonight since we have Al with us. And we're going to try and compile a list together, boys. We're going to have to work together to put together the best list. And again, what we're doing here is not necessarily picking what should be your draft order. We are picking where we think they're going to end up at the end of the season. So there could be guys here that we're high on, but we might draft a little bit later because they might fall in your draft. So take all that as it may. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and put a list together. We're going to go one at a time. Is that what the plan is?
One at a time.
Compile it.
All right. So
once someone is taken, that's where they're at. That's it. Can't move them.
Guess you have any problem with letting Al pop the cherry for his first go around back?
No, I just want to just preface it by saying that I always feel weird about these fantasy segments because for Seltzer, you and I as commissioners, with people that are in our leagues listening to this, we're giving away some secrets, some war room tactics.
Absolutely. And listen, what we'll do at the end is we can each run through our individual list very quickly at the end.
Yeah. Well, I'm the wild card that can throw these, your competitors off, your competition off here, Chris. You know what I mean? You could play some things close to the chest because you got me here.
Yeah. Well, last time Al was in fantasy football, he was taking the Yancey Thigpens and Carl Pickens of the world.
Well, we had Commissioner Diversa, aka Commissioner Drunk, letting people have the same tight end on their team. 2 teams at the same tight end.
A lot of Ben Utex.
All right.
And Bonner's own, what's his name? Becht.
Oh, yeah, Anthony Becht.
Yeah.
That might have been the guy, too. I think it was the Cardinals tight end. I can't remember who that was, though, at the time.
James O'Shaughnessy or something.
All right. So this is a guy that this is the 10 I think is going to be number 10. I think this is a guy that you both might potentially have higher. And here's the struggle with these wide receivers. And you guys tell me if I'm wrong with this. How do you leave some of these guys out of the top 10? The league now is so rich with wide receiver talent. This was hard, man.
Agreed 100%.
So I settled on my personal top 10. So this is my number 10 guy. It's a guy who last year, as a rookie, you're talking about 83 receptions, 1,100 yards, not that many touchdowns, but he played for a team that wasn't that much of an offensive juggernaut. But now he has a proven quarterback throwing him the football. And whether you think he's on the decline or not, he's still a step up from Zach Wilson. And so at number 10, I have Garrett Wilson on my list of fantasy wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm on board. I have him higher on the list. You mentioned you thought we would. Look, at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers may be a little bit past his prime at this point, but Aaron Rodgers tends to favor a specific receiver. We've seen it with Devontae Adams. We've seen it with Greg Jennings. We've seen it with Donald Driver. And there's nobody else that's going to be on that New York Jets team other than Garrett Wilson. Apparently, in training camp, they've clicked. Garrett Wilson's uber talented. I have him higher. We're going to do our individual list later. So we'll just say he's at 10 right now based on the Alice thing. I see a big year for Garrett Wilson.
I thought about him on mine. I didn't have him in my top 10 only because I'm probably in the minority, but I'm not sold on Aaron Rodgers. I think that I think his digression has nothing to do with the Packers in that situation and everything to do with being a human being and getting older. Tom Brady is the ultimate outlier, and I feel like Rodgers is still a really good quarterback, but I don't think of him anymore as a great quarterback currently.
Yeah, but
And changing teams, changing divisions, changing conferences, all that kind of stuff in play, I'm just not sold on him that much, which means I'm not sold on a lot of his weapons putting up the huge numbers that we're expecting as a result of his production. That's why I don't have him in my top 10.
But
I understand his talent and I understand everything you're talking about. I'm just concerned with that from that perspective of the quarterback. If he ages quickly throughout the year, if he gets hurt potentially throughout the year, how that's going to affect him and his statistics and the rest of the guys because they got weapons around that team.
But he had 83 for 1,100 with
That's true.
Wilson and Mike White, so it's an upgrade regardless.
True.
Right. Would you rather have 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers or Zach Wilson? Here's the other thing, Chris. Garrett Wilson last year, as far as all receivers, tight ends, whatever, running backs in the NFL, he had 19 targets in the red zone, which was, I think, 12th in the league. It's a lot of targets in the red zone, especially when you have a Breece Hall in the backfield who can get you some yards.
Yeah, but you're forgetting Uncle Randall Cobb. He's following Aaron around. That's his man.
So is
Lazard
right?
is following Rodgers around. That he was the one that clamored for him to be on the team.
So was Donald Driver, right? He's there too. Bubba Franks is there, right? Who else is coming?
Those guys are going to be on that team taking targets because Rodgers knows them and trusts them.
All right,
That's
so we
nothing you got to worry about.
All right, so we have Garrett Wilson at number 10. I'll go next because I have a guy that I don't know if I want to get him on this list or not. All right.
I'd take that scumbag.
And you know how this goes. You know how this goes. If you don't take him now, Chris is going to take some wild card.
Yeah. It's now or never.
I'm going to take the guys in my order that I got.
Chris is going to take Jalen Carter because we didn't take him on that one list.
All right, so I'll go next. I'll have it number 9. We might as well make it an entire Ohio State list, guys. So I have another second-year wide receiver out of Ohio State at number 9, and that's Mr. Chris Olave.
No, this is already a disaster.
Yeah, I don't have him on my list.
This is already.
So listen, he was very under the radar last year as far as a good year that he had. 72 catches, almost 1,100 yards, 4 touchdowns. So numbers very, very similar to Garrett Wilson. And that's with Andy Dalton at quarterback. I think it's a very similar situation to what you're seeing with Garrett Wilson. I've sat here and bashed Derek Carr, but the one thing Derek Carr will do is chuck it around. And he will pile up stats without winning football games. I don't think the Saints are going to be good. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Derek Carr has supported top wide receivers in the past with, again, Devontae Adams, a common name. Michael Crabtree, Amari Cooper have all succeeded under Derek Carr. I think Chris Olave is a super talent. I think he's just as good as Garrett Wilson. And I think he has a breakout year. I think that I was listening to something earlier. I think he's getting a lot of fantasy hype. I didn't think it would be as much. But I think he's going to be really good this year. And I think he could have upwards of 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns if everything breaks right for him.
I don't hate it. This lower
I do. I
half,
hate it a lot.
but this lower half, it's crapshoots. Like a Chris Olave is a guy that could potentially win you your league if you take him in. I don't know what round he's projected in. Let's say like the 9th, 10th round or something like that.
Dude, he's projected to go in like the 4th round now.
Oh, well, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I don't like it then.
Reminds me a lot of Jalen Waddle last year, going into last year.
We talked about before we started doing this how deep receivers are right now in the NFL, and you come up to put the 9th rated performing receiver this year at Chris Olave on a team with a quarterback who you have even said before, and we've all said, a lot of people have said, we don't trust.
I don't trust him to win games. I trust him to put up numbers. I don't trust him to win games.
That you said about me being a homer. That's a homer. That's an Ohio State. That's a little favoritism.
Chris, I just pulled up.
Buckeyes.
I pulled up Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros has him ranked as the number 12 receiver. I'm looking at ESPN now. Hold on, give me a second to.
I'm on Pro Football Focus. They got him at 32.
Is it fantasy football or NFL football you're looking at?
They work for both.
What are you looking at?
Let me see. This one is. Hold on. Wide receiver rankings. It's just wide receiver rankings. It just says.
Games over 100 yards last year.
That's fine. That's last year.
Some of the guys on this list that you just kicked off the top 10 though are wild. It's wild.
Well, there's one guy I have that's not on my top 10 that I know you guys are going to have. But let's keep moving it, Chris.
I mean,
keep looking at. I'm on fantasy. Like I said, I'm on Fantasy Pros, and they have him at number 12. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch. But let's keep moving.
Dude,
Guest hates when we do this.
It's fun on this when you talk about it, and then when you start it, I hate it because
you're the one who put Jared Goff as ranked number 3rd tier.
Well, that was because I didn't understand the rules.
Elite quarterback, Jared Goff.
He had a really good year last year. He did. By numbers wise, he was elite. But I digress. I'm gonna put Al's boy DJ Moore on here at number 8.
Oh, that's a freaking reach. Are you kidding me?
That's bad.
DJ Moore is going to have a huge year this year with the jump that is going to occur with Justin Fields. They went out and they gave up a lot of capital for him, and they're not going to not use him. They are going to use the hell out of him because of what they gave up. So for me, I think I've said before, I think DJ Moore is definitely a number 1 receiver in this league. And Darnell Mooney is not a number 1. He's going to be a great number 2. And that's going to help Justin Fields a lot. But DJ Moore is going to be a huge reason why Fields has a huge jump this year.
You think Justin Fields can support a top 10 wide receiver ranking?
I think with a guy like Moore, yes, because Moore is so versatile. He's not just an X receiver. Moore can run at the X, he can run at the Z, he can do end arounds, he can do all kind of different things he can do to get the ball and be dangerous. So he can do the deep ball, he can be a possession guy, he can do a lot.
Do receivers these days in fantasy, do they get points for when their quarterback rushes? Did I miss
what kind of league you're in?
Did I miss something?
Listen, I think Moore's going to have. First of all, Moore's had. I'm trying to think, he's had 3 years of 1,100 plus receiving yards, and he had guys like Baker Mayfield. He had guys like Sam Darnold. He's had guys like what elite quarterback has he played with?
Listen, I like DJ Moore. My issue is for you to rake me over the coals for Chris Olave. Again, Fantasy Pros is Olave at 12, has DJ Moore at 19. CBS is another one I just pulled up. They have Olave at 14. They have DJ Moore at 18. For you to rake me over the coals for the Olave pick and then to follow it up with DJ Moore, that's
I want him on the
hot,
list.
hot meat kettle.
I want him on the list.
All right, that's fine. He's on the list. He's number 8.
I mean, there's guys I'm going to put on there, but I want him on the list.
All right.
I believe in the Bears.
DJ Moore, number 8. Al, to you for number 7.
Well, we've now lost guys that deserve to be in this top 10. I can't go back.
Nope.
There's a clear cut like 5, I feel like. So now there's 2 guys here. I could take one of the I'll take Tyreek Hill here.
Okay.
I'll take Tyreek Hill. I have him and another guy, and the other guy better get picked. There's no way he's not going to get picked. So I'll take Tyreek Hill. I mean, the dude is a target machine. Looking at his stats from last year, he had 170 targets, 119 receptions. Tua didn't play every game, so he's getting targets despite who's throwing him the ball. Averaging about 10 yards per target. He had 7 touchdowns, over 1,700 yards receiving. I mean, this dude's a machine. There's no signs of slowing down, despite the fact that he's talking about possibly retiring. Miami has one of the most prolific offenses in the league as far as through the air. I don't see a change in things happening with Tyreek Hill. So give me him at 7.
He got clocked at one point last year at 23 miles an hour.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
And
He's an alien.
Tyreek Hill is one of the most fun players to own in fantasy because he can just score from anywhere on the field. 119 catches last year, 1,700 yards. As long as Tua stays healthy. Tua is the biggest question mark for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's why I'd be okay with him at 7. I have him higher than that, but I'm okay with at 7 because of the concern with Tua and his health.
All right. So it goes to me. So I'm trying to do the math to see where it's at because there's one guy that I'm uber high on. And I don't know. So 6, 5, 4, 3. This list might get a little messy, but you know what? I'm going to put him now. Actually, I have him higher on my list, but for the sake of our list, let me put it here. I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I like that. He was on my list, but he was one that got,
So I have him higher because I think he's going to. And unfortunately, I did see Matthew Berry has him as his ride or die, make or break player this year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 146 targets last year, 106 catches. Almost 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. We're all high on the Lions offense. They really kind of caught fire towards the end of last year. Jameson Williams is having issues early in the year. He's suspended for 6 games. They obviously lost Swift. Jamal Williams is gone. He had close to 20 touchdowns last year. So there's going to be opportunities for him. Outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, I think he's the guy in the passing game. Lions offense should be great again. And I was listening to Matthew Berry earlier today, and he gave a stat, and it said, when Amon-Ra St. Brown broke out, which was week 13 of his rookie year, so he's now going into his 3rd year, he had a breakout game week 13 of that season. Since that point, the only wide receiver with more fantasy points than him in the entire NFL is Justin Jefferson. It's Justin Jefferson 1. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown 2. I think he's a guy that could, if you can snag him in the late 2nd, early 3rd round, especially in the early 3rd, he can win your league. Like, he's that type of talent. He's really, really, really good. And the Lions offense should be good. I'm in on Amon-Ra St. Brown 100% this year.
He's another red zone guy. He gets a lot of red zone targets. He had 21 last year inside the 20 and another 7 inside the 10. I like him a lot. I worry about whether or not Jared Goff can do it again. I also worry a little bit about Detroit being a little overrated coming into this season.
Yeah, no, that's all makes sense. But I look at it as, again, rated the 2nd best offensive line in football. That's a great thing for Goff. If you look at Goff's numbers inside versus outside, his numbers inside for his career are really, really good. And I think if you look at the schedule, they were talking about it today, I think 8 of their last 9 games are either inside or in a retractable roof. So he's not going to have, even when he's on the road, a lot of cold weather games. He's not going to see a lot of that. And again, Jamal Williams was really, really efficient in the red zone last year. So you mentioned Amon-Ra's targets. If that goes down a little bit with David Montgomery and Gibbs, that may be even more red zone opportunities for Amon-Ra.
I know that this isn't the way we're doing this, but because we're doing projections, who we think are going to be the top 10 at the end of the year. But as far as safe picks, I could not have him this high up. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I'd have a whole bunch of guys ahead of him as far as if it was the sixth receiver taken in the draft.
Right. If I'm drafting, there's guys I would take in the first round before I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I'm picking where I think he's going to end up at the end of the year. Correct. There's
I
Yeah,
don't
safe
know.
guys out
I don't know. Honestly, got like Seltzer, that stat you said, I'm very familiar with that. Like he's been a fantasy stud. I don't know if I would be having him that much lower.
So let me say this. I have him third on my list. I have
Yeah,
him at number three.
and
And there are
that
guys below him that I would take before that just for safety reason. So again, at number 6 or 7, yeah, like maybe that's where we have him 6.
we have him at 6.
Yeah, maybe I would take him as a 6th receiver off the board, but I wouldn't take him. I'm trying to say it doesn't make a lot of sense. I have him third at my prediction at the end of the year, but there's guys I would take before that. Let me just say.
So before we get to Chris for pick number 5, here's the bottom 5. It's Garrett Wilson at 10, Chris Olave at 9, DJ Moore at 8, Tyreek Hill at 7, and Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6. So if you're listening right now, you're thinking, how the hell are they going to get this player in?
We're not.
We don't know.
we're not
We don't
gonna
know.
You're not. All right, so Chris, you're up for 5.
All right. So Seltzer, you should be very familiar with this guy that I'm about to pick, knowing me in fantasy. One of my favorite players in football, Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp comes back this year with a vengeance. He is arguably one of the best route runners in football. Stafford is going to also be back from injury this year. I think those guys still have a little bit of things to prove, especially both in the same boat coming back from injury. Some people already writing them off. I think that they're going to come back pretty strong this year. Cooper Kupp has been a fantasy juggernaut. Putting up one of, I can't remember in 21 if it was the best fantasy season of all time, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, last year he had the injury. But, I mean, he's an elite route runner. He does it all. Still had in 9 games last year, he had 75 catches.
Yeah, he was
95 targets.
before he got hurt.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, and there's nobody on the Rams right now that's really going to be a target thief for him. I think he's still the clear bona fide number 1 guy there, and he's still got some in it, a little bit, well, not a little bit. He's still got a good amount left in the tank, I believe. And he's a hard worker, man. That guy, I mean, he works hard. He was a middle round pick. The guy knows how it is to have to earn your spot. So he's not going to sit up there and slack off and count the checks and just say, hey, I did what I could. I just don't have it. He's going to work hard and get better and back to where he was, if not better than where he was. And I could easily see him being even higher again this year in the top 3. But for the sake of this exercise, I'm not passing him up because I don't trust either one of you two to pick him. So I'm going to take him at 5.
I think he's the most volatile of like the elites, and I actually thought he was going to go higher. I would have taken him within the top 5. I think he could be the number 1 guy at the end of the year.
He very well could be.
More to come on that later. All right, Al, let's go to you for 4.
Well, you're about to find out who's getting left off, I think, of this top 4. There's a guy who I think is not a sexy name because of the team he plays for, and he's underrated because of that, but he's an absolute monster and had 100 receptions, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns last season, and that's Davante Adams, and he's not going to be the guy that I pick here.
No.
I'm going to take a little hometown flavor.
No.
And I'm going to take A.J. Brown because I think with the new offensive coordinator and Brian Johnson, a guy who I think is going to want to pass the ball a little bit more, utilize some of Jalen Hurts' arm. Look, we're not talking about a Chris Olave or a DJ Moore. We're talking about an A.J. Brown who finished the year 6th in fantasy points last year, which was only 3 behind Davante. Okay? We're talking about a guy 88 catches, almost 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns, another red zone monster. He had 16 targets inside the 20 last season. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he runs great routes. He seems to have a rapport with Jalen Hurts that was built in from day one of him putting that Eagles uniform on. I said it in the last segment. I think that he is, or in the first segment, I think that there's a gap between him and Devontae Smith as far as who the number 1 guy is in Philly. Of course, Smith is going to take some of those catches. He's going to take some of those touchdowns. Dallas Goedert's going to take some. The backfield's a question when they're inside that 10. I can see them throwing that fade route to AJ and favoring that as their go-to bread and butter play in the red zone. So at number 4 here, I'm going to take AJ Brown.
Didn't
All right.
didn't Devontae have more catches than AJ Brown did last year?
I think he had more yards, didn't he?
Yeah,
AJ had almost 1,500 yards last year.
Oh, no. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. AJ had more yards. Devontae had more catches.
Yeah, let's say Devontae had 95 for 1196 and 7 touchdowns. I don't know about that gap, Al. I disagree with you with that. I don't think that's a huge gap. I think Devontae is right there as a one, at worst a 1B. I don't think he's a number 2. But you know what? It's a Philly show, so do your thing, Al. I'm with you. And the haters got to deal with it. AJ Brown, I'm fine with it.
Listen,
Let me cook.
I missed
missed
the boat last year with the Jalen Hurts AJ Brown connection. I'm not missing it again this year. AJ Brown breakout year, maybe 16 touchdowns this year.
Yep. There you go. Yeah, let Al cook. I'm with that. I mean, forget it. Like Devontae Adams, F him, whatever.
He's out.
You know what I'm saying?
So there's for
ahead.
me for number 3. And there's a couple names left on the list. This guy actually have a little bit lower, but
oh boy,
Al mentioned Devontae Adams.
Oh my God!
Boy, no, you can't do it, dude.
He's not going to make the list.
Oh my God.
Now,
so I have Stephon Diggs as Mr. Consistency. I'm not in love. He's not a sexy pick, but 100 catches in 4 of the last 5 years. Career high 11 touchdowns last year. He stayed healthy throughout his stint in Buffalo. He plays on a high-powered offense with a quarterback that's going to throw close to 40 touchdowns this year. Al mentioned my last pick, safer guys than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Stephon Diggs is one of them. I mean, he's a guy you can plug and play in your lineup, and you pretty much know what the numbers are going to say at the end of the year. So for me, I have a hard time making a top 10 list without somebody who's had the numbers he's had over the past 5 years. So for me, you got to go Stephon Diggs at number 3.
Diggs has 469 targets, which is that's since he's been in the league. Second only to Devontae Adams.
Yeah, but here's my issue with Devontae Adams is this is the first year he's played with a non-gunslinger quarterback. And I don't think it's a knock on Adams. I just think it's a knock on that Raiders team, and I think that team has disaster written on it. That's all.
Yeah, there's more question marks with the team around him.
I had Devontae Adams in multiple leagues last year. He was awesome. I just don't trust Garoppolo to be able to get him the football.
And that was since Diggs been in Buffalo. I'm sorry, not since he's been in the league. Since he's been in Buffalo, 469 targets.
Who's more likely, Chris? Honestly, who's more likely to score double-digit touchdowns this year? Devontae Adams or Stephon Diggs?
Devontae Adams.
Okay, I disagree.
You think that, but you think that because of the player, or you think that because of the offense? Like
The
Buffalo's
offense,
the best offenses in the league. You know that, and you don't know what you're getting from Las Vegas.
I look at Buffalo as a team that's going to score 4 touchdowns a week, and I look at Vegas as a team that's probably scoring 2.
Totally agree.
And I'm taking my chances with those numbers.
Okay.
All right, two guys.
You want to put a friendly wager on that? Bet some.
Sure, you want to put down $20 on the touchdown total
for Diggs versus Adams?
Diggs versus Adams.
Yeah, I could do that.
All right, mark it down. First official wager in 3K history.
Devontae Adams. Oh, what you going over unders, or you just going?
No, whoever has more touchdowns at the end of the year.
Okay, yeah, I definitely take that.
So we got 2 guys left. I assume I know the names that it's going to be.
After all this Devontae Adams love,
I'm sorry, Devontae. You know, I want to. He should be on here, but because of the way that we're thinking here, you know, he's not going to make it. But you got to go Jamar Chase here at 2. I know I've said it a couple times already tonight, but he also was one of my favorite players, and I'm giving a lot of flowers out tonight to some of my guys. One of my favorite guys in the league. He's just awesome. Love him. Wanted the Eagles to get him. Think he's a great player. Joe Burrow is. You actually could make an argument that Chase could be number 1 over Jefferson, or whoever you're going to put number 1 in this list, because when I compare those two, Burrow's still getting better. Kirk Cousins is on the downward trajectory at this point in his career. Burrow's still getting better, and Chase is going to go right along with him. So I feel like now you also could say that you have the T. Higgins effect too, because T. Higgins also could be a 1B receiver in that offense. But Chase is a man. He is dominant, and he's just getting started, man. I think he has potential to have, maybe I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like 115 for 1,818 touchdowns.
That's
There's
the
no
ceiling.
ceiling. There's no
Yeah.
ceiling for these guys.
Yeah.
All right, Al, hit us with the number one because should be straightforward.
Like, what is it about this team in purple that they just seem to find the most elite wide receivers on the planet Earth? It's Justin Jefferson, who's my son Jackson. I think it's his favorite player. So he's going to be very happy to hear this list. But when I look at Justin Jefferson's numbers, you're talking about 128 receptions, 1,800 yards last year, 8 touchdowns. I mean, this dude's unstoppable. He's unstoppable. Doesn't matter who's throwing the football. Kirk Cousins can get on the ball. He knows what he's doing. He's not a bad quarterback. Justin Jefferson is simply unstoppable, and there's no reason to believe or to doubt, I should say, that he'll end the season once again as the number one player in fantasy football.
All right, so Al, do you want to run through our list first, and then what we'll do is we'll run through our individual list, but no comments. Just we'll list off our guys.
Yes,
And then, Chris, did you do sleeper and bust or no?
No. I mean, I can give you it real quick if you want me to.
We'll do that at the end quickly. But
so here's the official 3K top 10 fantasy wide receiver list. Starting from number 10, we have Garrett Wilson. Number 9, Chris Olave. Number 8, DJ Moore. Number 7, Tyreek Hill. Number 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Number 5, Cooper Kupp. Number 4, AJ Brown. Number 3, Stephon Diggs. Number 2, Jamar Chase. And number 1, Justin Jefferson. Can we, in like 10 seconds or less, each one of us pick the one that we hate the most, that we disagree with the most?
DJ Moore, I have to say, is the one I disagree with the most.
DJ Moore. Get him out.
I would say Garrett Wilson.
At 10, though? I mean, that's come on.
No, there's no arguing. You can't make a case back.
All right, Chris, what's your top 10?
So 10-1, my top 10 was CeeDee Lamb. We didn't even mention his name in this conversation. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 9. DJ Moore is 8. AJ Brown is 7. Devontae Adams 6. Stephon Diggs 5. No comments, okay. Tyreek Hill 4. Cooper Kupp 3. Jamar Chase 2. Justin Jefferson 1.
Adam.
So I had Jalen Waddle at 10, Chris Olave at 9, CeeDee Lamb at 8, Garrett Wilson at 7, Tyreek Hill at 6, Stephon Diggs at 5, AJ Brown at 4, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 3, Jamar Chase at 2, and Justin Jefferson at 1. Notable absences for Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp on my list.
And for the record, I don't know if you guys caught it or not. That's why I paused. I had Diggs at 5 and Devontae Adams at 6, but I feel like you're going to get more potential points with more completions and yardage with Diggs, and Adams will have more touchdowns.
This like second and third tier of receivers, it's unreal, right? Like it's an unbelievable tier. All right, my 10-1, 10 I had Garrett Wilson, 9 I had DK Metcalf, 8 I have CeeDee Lamb, 7 AJ Brown, 7 Tyreek Hill, 6 AJ Brown, 5 Devontae Adams, 4 Cooper Kupp, 3 Stephon Diggs, 2 Jamar Chase, 1 Justin Jefferson.
Okay, and real quickly, we'll do sleepers and busts. While you guys get them together, I'll do mine quickly. Sleeper, this one's a risk, but I have Calvin Ridley as my sleeper in Jacksonville. I'm not a huge fan of guys who have missed a year of football, as you remember me saying with Deshaun Watson. But this guy's heading into a new team with a young quarterback who's ready to take off. Can he establish himself as a number one there, or will it be Christian Kirk? He's got a nose for the end zone. His last full season with the Falcons, he went for 90 catches, 1,400 yards, and 9 touchdowns. If you could snag him as your wide receiver number 2, his ceiling is through the roof. But there's some risk associated with that pick. So I have Calvin Ridley as my sleeper. And my bust is a guy we have on our list, boys. I have Cooper Kupp as my bust. I hate to do it. I had him last year. He was unbelievable. But I talked last week about how I felt about the Rams. I'm concerned about Matt Stafford's health. I'm also concerned about Cooper Kupp's health. He had a bad ankle injury at the end of last year. He's already having hamstring issues in camp. He's on the other side of 30 at this point in his career. I just don't think that team's going to be good. And while I still think you're going to get production from Cooper Kupp, you're going to have to take him in the top 6, 7 picks in your draft to get him. And I don't think he's going to provide that type of value come the end of the year. I think he ends the year probably more around wide receiver 14, 15 than he does a top 5 receiver.
All right. For my bust, I don't know if this counts as a bust because he's not really in that top tier. Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper had a very good year last year. It was his best year almost statistically across the board in a Cleveland Browns uniform. I don't think he can duplicate that. I just think there's nowhere to go but down for him, even with Deshaun Watson potentially as a full year quarterback. Too many question marks in Cleveland. You guys know I'm not a Cleveland fan this year, so I have him as my potential bust. And then for my sleeper, I mentioned it in the segment we talked about the AFC West. I think Jerry Jeudy can break out this year. I think with Sean Payton calling the shots, I think with Russell Wilson having a year under his belt, getting rid of Nathaniel Hackett, he's the number 1 guy right now in Denver. I think Jerry Jeudy could potentially break out and end the year a top 15, top 10 wide receiver.
So, ironically, Amari Cooper was Chris's bust last year, and I actually had Jerry Jeudy in my top 10. Both of those picks were wrong last year. So hopefully it turns out better for you than it did for us.
Looks like I wasn't a fan of the podcast last year.
So I guess I'll go with my sleeper first. I think Devontae Smith. I mentioned it a couple times already this show. Devontae Smith could easily, I think, wind up as a top 10 receiver this year. I think that I do not think that the gap is that big with him and AJ Brown, especially now entering his 3rd season. He knows the speed of the league now. He's definitely he took a huge stride last year in year 2 from his rookie year. I think this year he's definitely going to catch over 100 balls. He's definitely going to have, I would say, over 1,300 yards. The touchdowns will be what separates him from top 10 or outside the top 10. And I think that, this guy's limit. I've said that he looks to me like a Marvin Harrison type receiver, and I think he can put up Marvin Harrison type production in this league, even with AJ Brown on the other side. And my bust is I was going back and forth between DeAndre Hopkins and the guy that I'm actually going to go with, but Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans, I don't know. We don't really know who his quarterback is going to be. Right now, it's supposed to be Baker Mayfield. That's an L. They have Kyle Trask kind of in the background there as a young quarterback. We're trying to figure out if they're going to actually give him a shot. I don't really think they're going to be that great this year. And I wonder if with, the Buccaneers of yesteryear now, the NFL has such quick turnover, and those championship teams of the Bucs are at this point are long gone. And you just wonder, at least for me, between his injuries that have added up and also like mentally, how much of him is invested still in this Buccaneers team. And you also have, Godwin on the other side still, who's younger and just as good, taking targets. I just don't have a good feeling about Mike Evans this year from a fantasy perspective. I like the guy. I've been a big fan of his. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I just don't really feel comfortable if I'm drafting Mike Evans in fantasy this year.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I'm looking at the rankings now, and I think one ranking has him as number 30 wide receiver, and the other one has him at 36. So
can you take him as a bust? Like, what are the expectations for Mike Evans?
I think
he's still the number 1 receiver. He's still under 30.
All right.
Yeah, you're going to need him to bottom out at those. But, historically, he's been a top 10 wide receiver. Yeah. It's just the situation there this year is not going to be great, especially from the quarterback side of things. But we will see. I enjoyed it, guys, even if the list is a disaster. Every time
I don't think it's a disaster, but it could be tweaked.
This is definitely our best list of the 3 that we've done now. This is the most competent list.
We'll let the people decide on that.
Well, Taco Bell's not on this list. So they're not going to be pissed off.
Yeah, I was shocked at the Taco Bell hate, but that's for another day. Let's wrap it up. Episode 57 is now in the books. Just another reminder, next week we will be releasing on Wednesday, and that will be for the foreseeable future throughout the football season. So until then, let's drop that beat.